Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Stutz. I'm the Museum Curator at the Works. We're going to go ahead and get started here very shortly. I just want to give a few reminders to everyone. Please feel free to ask questions throughout this presentation. Your video as well as your audio will be muted, so you won't be able to ask me directly, but there is a chat feature on Zoom that you can use to ask me questions. So I sent everyone a message just a couple of minutes ago, just that we would get started. So if you saw that, great. That probably will help you find your chat feature if you're not familiar with Zoom. You should be able to see a spot probably at the bottom of your screen where you can type a message to me or to all of the attendees. If you would like to ask a question, please do that. I will be trying to pay attention to that as best as I can. So if I can answer a question during the presentation, I'll be happy to do that. If I don't, though, I will go back through at the end of the presentation and go through all of the questions. I really anticipate that this will help jar a lot of your memories. Hopefully some of you who remember some of the things that we'll talk about will be able to share some of those memories. That's, I think, interesting to all of the attendees as well as to me, because I do learn information that way as well. So please feel free to share your memories. Please feel free to ask questions. Anything that you want to ask or comment about, please feel free. You can do that in the chat feature. This is being recorded. So this video, if either you have to leave early or someone that you know who wasn't able to join live tonight, if they wanted to participate in this as well, they will be able to see it later online. We posted to our YouTube channel, which will also be shared on our Facebook group. So please spread the word about that. Tell your friends or family if they were interested that they will be able to see this later. You'll also be able to rewatch it later on if you want, because it will be recorded. Again, my name is Corey Stutz, and I am the Museum Curator at the Works. We are going to be talking about downtown department stores, but I am going to turn my video off just so that you're not looking at me the whole time. You should still be able to hear me, though, just without having to stare at me. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I know that there are still people that continue to join, but we will get this show on the road. So when we think about shopping in downtown Newark, maybe images like this come to mind. If we think of downtown department stores, lovely Victorian ladies looking in the windows, shopping, maybe in the arcade, which is what this picture is from. Kind of brings a very idyllic picture to mind, sort of the turn of the century era of Selfridges or maybe Harrods, Macy's, Bloomingdale's, those big department stores. And really, to some degree, we had places like that in Newark as well. I think the term department store gets a little bit confusing to some people as to what it is or what it isn't. And its origins are definitely a little bit difficult to sort out because, like most things, it was a natural evolution to become what we now know of as department stores. So there isn't a clear cutoff or starting point as to when everything began. But that's not really that important for the purpose of this presentation, because we are talking about the stores that we had in Newark that are specific to that. So there is definitely a transitional point from when we had stores that were more specific to when we started to see more broad department stores that carried a wider variety of goods. So way back in the 19th century, as you can see in this picture, we had a lot of places that were more specific types of businesses. You had smaller, what were often called dry goods stores. So that would be, a variety of, there might be some food items, there would be cloth, there would be some bulk, maybe grain or feed. It could really be a variety. Supplies that you would need at home that you could go to the store and get. You had hardware stores, you had wholesale stores, you had small grocery stores, shoe stores, tailors, millineries, that kind of thing. You would go to a specific place for what you needed. So if you needed a new hat, you would go to the millinery to get your hat. And then you might stop next door to get a pair of shoes, and you might stop next door to get a cane or something, whatever you want. You would go to those specific places. Whereas nowadays, we're used to going to Walmart or Target or wherever, being able to get all of that in one stop. Here's another picture. I just like these old pictures, and you'll notice I was really generous with the pictures in this presentation because there were just so many good ones that I wanted to share. So some of them are just for the sake of looking at old pictures, and I had a really hard time editing down the pictures that I wanted to share. So with that said, there's a lot to get through in this presentation, so I'll do my best to keep it to an hour. But if you need to pop out before then and it's just you have something going on, it's getting too long, please feel free. As I said, this will be recorded, so you'll be able to catch whatever you missed if you had to leave early. So we are currently, I guess I should say what we're looking at. Both of these photos are on 3rd Street on the west side of the square, and several of the buildings are still there. If I go back just a little bit, a couple of these buildings are here, only 2 in terms of what you can see. This one is still here and this one is still here, and this one, but this on the corner, this one, these are all gone. Oops. If we move a little bit further south, most of these buildings are still here, but all these ones down here are gone. Just to give you some reference. If we keep moving south, excuse me, we talked about these dry goods stores a little bit. And we really have to start in this area to start talking about retail in Newark and the development of shopping in downtown Newark and in Newark in general. So this is a really good example of a dry goods store. This building that we're looking at is on South 3rd Street. I think the address is 36, but don't quote me on that. We are at the intersection of South 3rd and the Canal. You might recognize it. This building was originally the home of what was called Fleek and Sherwood. Went through a few name changes, became Fleek and Neal, became Fleek and Son for quite a long time. And they were a wholesale dry goods store. They were founded in the 1860s and closed down in the 1950s, I believe in 1952. 1953. And they had been open at that point for 92 years. So when they closed, they were reported to be the oldest wholesaler in the entire state. And they had been run by a couple of generations of the same family. This is actually a picture of the building being built. If you've been a part of any of my presentations, you know I love buildings. I'm a local historian who specializes in historic buildings and historic architecture, the built environment that's created our urban landscape. So that kind of stuff really interests me. So this picture is great, showing this building being built in 1861. However, Fleek and Neal, Fleek and Sherwood, they were only in that building for a short while. Eventually they outgrew the space and they moved across the street to a building that is no longer there, but this is a picture of it before it was torn down. Unfortunately, I don't have a historic picture of this building, but this is where Fleek and Neal was located, and later Fleek and Son was located for the majority of its lifetime. Famous photographer Clarence White worked at this place. It was actually the reason that he came to Newark. His father had gotten a job at Fleek and Neal, and Clarence ended up working there as well. Going to give a not so shameless plug that our gallery show that features Clarence White and the Newark Camera Club is still up in our gallery. We will be open for about another week and a half. So you can stop on by and see that show if you haven't already. It will be closing when we shut down for the holiday. So you want to make sure that you can get the chance to come and see that. All right, back to this presentation. So this is what that building looks like now. It's not there. If you were to drive down the street, this is what you would see. But that was the location of Fleek and Neal. So a longtime wholesaler of dry goods. You could go for all kinds of stuff, but it wasn't the wide variety. You wouldn't be able to go and get everything that you need for your house in one spot, and food and clothes and shoes and all of This is the other building today, so you definitely probably recognize this view, although this is a little outdated now. I think they painted the building blue within the last year, so it looks a little different now. But this is the building that's still there. Long time, very well-known wholesaler. Now, I mentioned it was in the same family for a long time. This is a picture of Henry Sherwood Fleek, who was the son of John Sherwood Fleek, who was the one that founded it. Henry Sherwood Fleek, we are all probably familiar with his house. He made an impact on Newark through his business, but his home still stands. And this is a picture of it from shortly after it was built in 1890. Many people don't know this house was originally named Ingleside, and I've only ever found one reference to that, so I'm not sure if the name stuck, if they kept it for very long. But it was named Ingleside in 1890, and this is what it looks like today. Still there. Of course, I have to throw in some historic homes along the way. Can't do a presentation without that. So as we get to the turn of the century, as we just tip beyond 1900 and into the very early years of the 20th century, we start to really see the development of some of what could genuinely be called department stores in Newark. And probably the biggest one at the time, it was definitely the biggest one when it was opened. And in the newspapers, this was heralded as Newark's first genuine department store. And that was the Powers Miller Company. This you can see is an ad from June of 1903 when they were getting ready to open the company. And there's a little drawing there of the building. Here's a picture of it. It was located on West Church Street. Took up half of the block from the middle of between Church and 3rd, or the middle of 3rd and 4th, all the way over to 4th Street. Powers Miller Department Store was a really, really large store. I think it covered 30,000 square feet within this building. And they had a variety of departments: women's wear, men's wear, curtains, draperies, home goods, all kinds of stuff. They had genuine different departments that were on different floors. And so it really was a true department store. It was a combined effort of several businessmen in Newark, including William Charles Miller, including Warren Wyant, including a man, his last name was Powers, and unfortunately his first name escapes me at the moment. It's where the Powers Miller Company came from. And there were several other investors as well that were local businessmen who had invested in this business. This is a shot from the interior, and I apologize, it's not the best quality. It is a little fuzzy, but I blew this up out of a book. It was kind of tiny to begin with. But it gives you some idea of how things were set up. To be honest, it's probably not that much different from how a lot of stores would be. If you would go into Macy's or, something like that, Nordstrom, go into a department store, you would still see merchandise, things set up in cases, things out on display. And a lot of the basis for that actually goes back pretty far. A lot of our department store design and merchandising is actually based off of something that happened around 1850. In the 1850s, there was a royal exhibition that was patronized by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. And it took place in an entirely glass building called the Crystal Palace. And they had vendors and merchants from all over the world. And so that really kind of set the stage for how we merchandise and how we set up department stores, even to this day. So there's a lot of similarities historically up to the present. So they're not that unfamiliar. Really, the only things, of course, the things that they have for sale you'd probably have a hard time finding in a store, and certainly the clothing has changed. But otherwise, the setup would be pretty similar. This is one of the main financial backers. This is William Charles Miller. He's another person who made a huge impact on Newark through his business, which even though that did not last through the years, his home did. This is a picture of his home. This is on Hudson Avenue. And it's actually just across from the last house that we looked at. This is on the corner of Hudson and Elizabeth, and this is what it looks like today. So I'm sure you've been by his home and seen it and maybe wondered who lived there. And now you know it was William Charles Miller of the Powers Miller Department Store. However, this was a pretty tragic thing that happened. So the store opened in June of 1903. And in December of that year, one of the biggest fires to have ever hit Newark occurred. So this building was brand new. It had been built in 1902. And the department store was their first tenant. There were other tenants in the other half of the building, but the department store took up half of the building. But in December of 1902, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, someone was walking by and they noticed that there was smoke coming out of the building. So they ran to trigger the fire alarm. The fire department came, and the fire had actually broken out in the basement of the building. Unfortunately, there was not any exterior entrance to the basement. You had to access it through the building itself from the inside. But because of the way that the fire was and where it was, they couldn't actually get down into the basement. Another problem that they later discovered was that a gas pipe had ruptured and was just feeding gas into the fire. So that was making it almost impossible for them to actually put out the fire. So as you can imagine, it spread throughout the building, through all 3 floors. The fire department worked through the night trying to put it out. They were climbing on top of the building. They were shooting water down the elevator shaft. They were trying to break open skylights to put water into the building. They were trying to get the windows out, so people were throwing rocks to break the windows so that they could shoot water in. People started shooting guns at the windows, and I read a story where someone was shooting the windows out, and the fire department got mad because they were standing on the roof while this person was shooting at the windows and they were getting shot at. So it was sort of chaotic, as you can imagine. This was a huge fire. They didn't have a way to actually turn off the gas because the gas company had never installed a line that was that big before anywhere else in Newark. And so they didn't actually have a wrench that was the right size to be able to close the valve to shut off gas to the building. So there was something else that I read that said someone had the idea to run to a blacksmith and see if he could make a wrench in time, which I have to imagine that would probably take longer than the time that they had. All that to say, it was a quite chaotic event. People were probably scrambling to try to get the fire out. And by the next day, it had finally been put out. The building itself stood structurally, but it essentially ripped through the floors. It destroyed entirely the stock of the store. So they lost everything for the most part that they had. They did move some merchandise out to another location and marked it down deeply. Anything that could still be sold, but the majority of it was a total loss. Unfortunately, they had insured the building and the stock of merchandise for less than what it was actually worth, so they ended up losing money right off the bat on this. However, they wanted to get back to business as soon as they could, so it only took them 3 months to redo the inside of the building, and it really only affected the Powers Miller half. The building was divided, and so I assume that the wall that was separating the Powers Miller department store from what was next door, which was a ballroom, that must have acted like a firewall and kept the fire on that side. Because although there was smoke damage in other parts of the building, there wasn't any fire damage in that. So they were able to repair, and it only took them 3 months. They reopened in March of 1904. But they only lasted in that building for a couple more years. And in 1906, the Stewart Brothers and Allward Company opened their doors in that building, and they remained there for over 90 years. I think 96 years, maybe. They closed not that long ago. And they were one of Newark's longest lasting businesses at the time that they closed. However, Powers Miller didn't go out of business in 1906. Oh, there's a picture of the building as it is today. So it's been revitalized. It is home to Moe's Barbecue, 31 West, which is a music venue and event space. And there's a variety of other businesses in there as well as I think they're renovating the apartments upstairs. So the building has gotten a new lease on life and is pretty hopping. Although I will say Definitely maybe not during 2020 as most other places are, but in non-pandemic times, this is the place to be in downtown Newark. So in 1906, Powers Miller just got a new home is what happened. So they were really successful. And I think the story of what had happened with the fire really tugged on people's heartstrings, and they definitely marketed it that way as this big tragedy. But the store was successful and they needed to expand. So this really grainy picture is a proposed rendering of a building that was going to be financed by Eli Hall, who was a real estate investor and a businessman in general. He had a variety of different business pursuits and things that he was involved in. His house, in fact, still stands on West Main Street as well, at the between Linden and Neal. So this was the building that he proposed. He was a pioneering investor in poured concrete structures. So this building is built out of poured concrete, and it looks pretty similar to the rendering. So this is the building that was built. Like I said, it was started in 1906. And I think it's 6 floors. So Powers Miller remained here until they went bankrupt. And it didn't take that long. So I'm not sure what exactly led to their bankruptcy. But by 1911, the Powers Miller department store had completely gone bankrupt. This is a picture of what the building looks like now. So as you can see, and I'll just mention, I'll go back to this. So the tall building on the right is the Newark Trust. If any of you grew up in Newark or have been here since before the late 80s, you would remember the Newark Trust. Even if you weren't here before the late 80s, you might have heard about it or seen pictures of it. That was a bank building as well as many offices. The trust obviously did not survive, but the whole building is still there, even though it looks completely different. So after, I think it was in 1986, they tore down the Newark Trust building. And the Central Trust, it started as the Newark Trust, but the bank that remained there was called the Central Trust. And they purchased the building next door, the Hall building, in 1986 and moved into it and tore down the Trust building and renovated the Hall building. Now the Hall building, this looks entirely different. It does not look like the same building. It has been renovated at least 3 times that I'm aware of, major exterior renovations, and we'll talk about why that has happened a little bit later. So in 1911, when Powers Miller went bankrupt, somebody that we've all probably heard of purchased their stock of goods. And as you can see by this newspaper article, Powers Miller Store is purchased today by John J. Carroll, for $54,600. So before we talk about his purchase of Powers Miller, let's talk about John J. Carroll's beginnings. So he was actually born, I believe, in Chillicothe, moved to Columbus, and that's where he got started in the retail business. In 1886, he came to Newark and he started his own company with a group of other businessmen, and it was called Carroll and Company. And it was located here in this building. This is, it was referred to at the time as the Crane Building. And they were only here for about a year. So they started here in 1886. This is located on South Park Place. This is a picture of the building today. It is still there. But they were only there for about a year. In 1887, they moved. So as you can see, Carroll and Company, they called it the Columbus store because he had come from Columbus. So it says, owing to the expiration of our lease, April 1st, 1887, we are compelled to vacate the room we now occupy and will be in our new quarters, the Donovan Building on the west side of the public square, about February 15th. So they only remained at that original location for 1 year. And then they moved to the west side of the square. So here they remained for about 24, 25 years. Here is a drawing of the building. I think it's actually an enhanced photo. It was pretty common. But this was from a publication around the turn of the century that advertised Newark businesses and highlighted some of the successful businesses. This building is still around, and you might not be familiar by looking at this by what it is, although you might. But here's a picture from, we are looking, this is 3rd Street, looking north-ish from about West Main. And actually the John J. Carroll business, which was at the time called Carroll Company, I believe. I'm not sure if it had changed yet, is to the left. So there's a lot of things that we can see, a lot of really wonderful buildings and interesting things. But this is the building right here. So if you look on the signs, you can see dry goods, carpets, ladies outfitter, and then on the bottom it says John J. Carroll. So this building today is home to Barrel and Bore. It's still there. And John J. Carroll was here from 1887 until 1911. So of course, in 1911, he moved. He purchased the stock of Powers Miller, and he moved to the Hall building. You can see a lovely little sketch there of the building in this ad. They moved on their 25th anniversary, or 25th year, not necessarily on their 25th anniversary, but on the 25th year. So they were located there for 8 years. And then, as did with their first move, the lease expired on the building. So they were looking for a place to go, and it was time. John J. Carroll decided to own their own building and have his own spot. So he decided to build his own building. So this is from 1919. They had intended to be able to move in late 1919 and had told everyone that they would because of when their lease was expiring. However, there were some construction setbacks, so the building wasn't done actually on time. So for a brief period of time, they had to vacate the Hall building where they had been. They moved to South 3rd Street, actually to the building that we looked at earlier that had been the original location of Fleek and Neal at 36 South 3rd. So they were there just for a few months. And then in February of 1920, they moved into their very own building that was built especially for them. This is the longest home of John J. Carroll Department Store. And it's a building that I'm sure we are all familiar with because it's still there downtown. Still looks quite the same as it ever did. Unfortunately, I've never had the pleasure to go in this building, but I've heard quite a lot of people talk about the memories that they have here. I've heard about the sparkly steps and the tubes that they would send things through from the cashier up to the banking office or the finance office. I've heard all kinds of things, people getting, their Girl Scout things here, getting their ears pierced here, first dresses here, that type of thing. So there's a lot of memories associated with Carroll's Department Store. It remained here in this building for 62 years under the same ownership. Actually here, this is a picture of John J. Carroll. He didn't actually get to spend too much time in his new building. As I said, they moved in 1920. And then he passed away in 1931. So I guess he got about a good decade there. This is a picture of him. And then his house does still survive as well. This is a drawing of it. It was designed by Frank Packard, who actually also designed the house of William C. Miller. This is just a few doors north of Miller's house on Hudson, and here it is today. It is still there. So as I was saying, Carroll stayed there under that ownership for 62 years until 1982. During that year, the company was bought by Ullman's, the Ullman Company. And initially they had promised to keep the Carroll's name, which they kept for a few years. And then they did change the name of the store to Ullman's. So this is a picture from the article of when Ullman's closed in 1995. So there was a business in that building for the first 75 years of its life, and the majority of its life. That was obviously we're going on a while now, but 25 years ago was when it closed. So I'm sure a lot of people, as I said, remember things about this building. Unfortunately, I've never been able to go inside of it. I tried really hard to actually find pictures of the inside of this building, and I really couldn't. So if any of you have pictures, if any of you worked there, or just for whatever reason might have pictures from the inside, my contact information will be at the end of this presentation, and I would love to be able to see some pictures of the inside. You can, if you have them and want to email them to me, or you can always stop by and show them to me, whatever you would like to do. I'm always looking for pictures, and I love to see old pictures. So that's just a side note. So after John Jay Carroll vacated the Hall building, we're going to keep coming back to this building quite a few times. The next tenant was Meyer and Lindorf. So this is the original location of Meyer and Lindorf, and where we're looking at right now is on 2nd Street. We're on the east side of the square. The building along the left-hand side is the Hotel Warden. And then in the middle, you should see a sign that says Evans Drugs. And then right above that, right here, you can see Meyer and Lindorf. This building is no longer here. It was torn down. And the Licking County Administration Building is there now. Wendy's is on the corner over here, and then the administration building is here. Meyer and Lindorf company was founded in the 1880s. And they started out as a dry goods store too, not really a full-flung department store, but they did have a variety of dry goods. And then eventually they did start to add ladies' clothing, home furnishings, that kind of thing, and really developed into a department store. And as that happened, they ran out of space. So they needed to expand their store and get some more room. So when the Hall building became available, they moved in. And someone said, is that CJ Evans drugstore? It is, yes. It's his drugstore. Let me go back. On 2nd Street. And actually, I think I got this picture from an article about the Evans drugstore specifically, but it just so happens to have Meyer Lindorf in it as well. It's a good point. When we look at historic photos, always look in the backgrounds, because that's where we see a lot of good stuff. This is a picture of inside Meyer Lindorf at that location. You can see section of curtain and drapery department. So at this point, they had really started to expand into other goods, not just dry goods. So they moved to the Hall building, and they remained there from 1911 until 1929. At that point, the owner, here's another department, sold his stock to the Marshall Field Company. And Marshall Field changed the name of the business to King and Company. This is a picture of Mr. Lindorf. I think his initials were A.R. Lindorf. This is from a newspaper, and unfortunately the edge of the newspaper, something must have happened to it. So it's not a complete picture of him, but this gives you an idea of who owned business. He passed away in the 1930s, 1938, I believe. But in 1929, he sold his business to Marshall Field, and they changed the name to the King Company. So here's a picture. We're back at the Hall building, and you can see the sign there says King Dry Goods Company. So in 1929, we have the beginnings of a very well-known Newark store. Eventually, Marshall Field sold the business to a couple of business people, and they were not local. There was, I think one of the business partners was from Michigan, and the other one was from Boston. But they came together and purchased the business, and they changed the name slightly. They kept the King part, so they changed it to King's Department Store. That was in 1939, I believe, late 1930s. So here you can see the Hall building with King's Department Store. And for most people in Newark, they associate this building with King's. King's was here for not quite 40 years. So in the 1950s, we started to have a string of fires at King's Department Store. There were two really devastating ones that happened. So here you can see there's smoke engulfing the top of the building. and the fire had spread throughout the building pretty extensively. Now, because the building was built out of poured concrete, the structure itself wasn't really that damaged, but the contents of the store were. However, King's was able to recover from this, so they did, rebuild the inside of the store. They recovered from the stock that was lost, and they continued business. This was in 1951, the first fire. There was a second fire that happened at King's department store in 1966, and that one was really the big one. This one was a big one, but the one in 1966 was the final nail in the coffin. Unfortunately, the company wasn't able to recover from that fire, and they did end up having to declare bankruptcy because of their losses. So I mentioned that the building doesn't look anything like it did originally, and that's partly because of these fires. So after this one in 1951, they redid the front of the building, and it had sort of a more modern look to it. And unfortunately, I don't think I have a picture of that. And then in 1966, they redid it again after that fire, and it took on a completely different appearance. It was more of an orangey brick. And at that point in time, they changed the windows so that they looked different. And then the last remodel that made it look like it does now was when Central Trust moved in the late 80s. They remodeled it again and made it look the way that it does now. So the current appearance is the building remodeled in around 1987 or 1988, but it has been remodeled a few times before that. So let's talk about some of the other ones. Now, we talked about some of the big stores that people remember, but of course downtown there were other department stores too. Penny's is one that a lot of people are familiar with, and that's a department store that we still have. This wasn't locally owned, obviously, but we still have Penny's, at least for now. It seems like a lot of these businesses are kind of having some financial troubles. But here you can see an ad that was announcing the opening of JCPenney in downtown Newark. Penny's opened in October of 1936 in what's called the Hibberton Shouse building. This building was located on the corner of 2nd and East Main. It was on the northeast corner of that. So nowadays, of course, this building is gone. First Federal Savings is there. Penny's was located here for, around 30 years. They opened in 1936 and they moved to Southgate in 1962. So they were there for 26 years in downtown Newark. Of course, they shared the building with a few other businesses. Scott's Furniture was one that was there for a very long time and was there until the end of the building. So in 1962, Penny's moved to Southgate. Here you can see an ad that was announcing that. After they completed construction at Southgate, that was really the place to be. Southgate was I don't think it was the first shopping center in the area, but it was like the second one. And it was definitely a big deal when it happened. So strip malls and shopping centers were kind of a new thing in the late 50s and 1960s. And that was really the place to be. Heath, I don't even think Heath was a city yet at that point, but it was expanding and definitely developing. And Southgate drew a lot of businesses away from downtown Newark. As everyone had sort of prospered in the post-war era after World War II, at least everyone in the United States for the most part. So a lot of people had cars, a lot of people had, traveling further out was not an issue. And because of that, because of everyone driving, a big reason was that they, A, needed a place to park all of their cars, but B, the aging buildings in the downtown area were costing these businesses money to maintain. So they started building out and building big modern buildings, and that sort of started signaling the decline of downtown for a few decades. I won't say that it killed it, because I think it's definitely, we're seeing downtowns everywhere sort of being revitalized again. Anyway, that's another conversation, but this is from 1962 when Penny's moved. Now the building remained for another 15 years. However, it suffered really devastating fire. This was 1977. You can see the sign for Scott's Furniture still there. A really well-known restaurant, the Carousel Restaurant, was located in this building as well. So here you can see the damage from the fire, and eventually that building was torn down, and this is what has replaced it. Here's another very familiar store to probably everyone, and you might not have realized that that's what this building is. But what we're looking at right now, this is the southeast corner of the intersection of Main and 4th. So this is right across from the city building. And this is Sears. Sears was built in downtown Newark in 1929. And it eventually also moved to Southgate in August of 1965. So it spent 36 years downtown. And of course, the building is still there, still on the corner there of 4th and Main. As you can see, the buildings have come and gone next to it, but this one does still remain, and it's in pretty good shape. It's currently office buildings or offices for a variety of different places. So I want to give some mention to some places that might not necessarily fit the typical description of a department store, but that a lot of people would remember. So first of all, this picture, if we're talking about retail, this is sort of gold because you can see all kinds of places. You can see Sargent's, The Hub, Kresge's, King's. In the very distance, you can see Green Bay Furs. We have a couple of drugstores. So there's all kinds of things in this picture. However, what I want to talk about is Kresge's. So there's, I've had a lot of people talking to me about Kresge's lately, and we actually had 2 Kresge stores, and they were open simultaneously. So the one that you can see in the foreground right here, just south of King's, that's the Kresge, it was the dollar store. And the one here, just north of the Trust Building, was the Kresge 5 and Dime. So the original one to open was the 5 and Dime, and this is a picture of it. It opened on February 10th of 1912. It opened in what's called the American House, which was originally a hotel and retail space. It's one of Newark's oldest downtown buildings, dating likely from around the 1840s. So this was the original Kresge's that was in Newark. And then on November 23rd of 1927, the other Kresge's opened. So here's another view looking down the street. So you can see here's the Kresge's 5 and Dime. Here's the dollar store. I think they called them 25 cents to $1. So they had different price merchandise. So Kresge's would probably still be considered a department store because they did have different departments essentially, but it was a discount department store. And it was a mainstay for years and years and years. Here's a view of, I think this is from a parade or something, but I guess it's a good view of the front of the Kresge's 25 to $1 store. And then we saw this picture earlier, but it really kind of gives a really good picture of the Kresge's building as well. And I apologize for the quality of this, but I wanted to show, so this is the lunch counter at Kresge's. And I think this one was at the 5 and Dime. I'm not positive though. This was filed with other pictures that were from the 5 and Dime, so I assume this is from that one. But if anybody knows for sure, if anyone remembers this, please let me know because I would really like to know. Then of course, a picture of the inside. So Kresge's was downtown for 65 years total, opened in 1912. They closed in, oh, actually it wasn't that long. They closed in 1970. I apologize, I was thinking it was 77. So they were there for 58 years in total. So they closed on December 31st of 1970. And that was because of a nationwide thing. So they let their lease expire. Kresge was facing some financial issues. It was, of course, a nationwide store, but they were closing any stores that made less than $500,000 annually. And so the Kresge stores here did not make the cut. I think it was in 1977, though, was when Kresge officially switched gears, and they stopped being called Kresge's, and the business was changed to Kmart. So in one way, shape, or form, we've all probably been to Kresge's still, whether it was Kresge's or Kmart. But now I'm not even sure if there are that many Kmarts around still. So this is the Kresge dollar store today. The building's still there. And this is the Kresge 5 and Dime. It's now home to the Buckeye Winery. So both of these buildings are still here. Had a completely different past than what they used to be, as is the case with most things. So we can't really talk about downtown retail without talking about the arcade. I did start off with a picture of it, but I want to touch on it briefly. The arcade itself isn't really a department store, but it is a hub of retail. The arcade started construction in 1906, but I believe it opened in June of 1909. And at the time, it was one of only 8 glass enclosed shopping centers, essentially. It's sort of the precursor to the mall. And it was set up to, I think, house 25 businesses, but at certain points in time, it had up to 30. Eventually, they expanded the arcade. Of course, it runs between 3rd and 4th Street, but they expanded it south to reach Main Street. It had a hotel, it had a theater, it had all kinds of stores. It was really a central point in the downtown retail scene, really. It is hopefully about to experience its own renaissance, as it has been purchased, and there's plans to return it to its historic appearance. If anyone's seen those plans, they look really exciting. So hopefully that will happen sooner than later. Of course, there it is today. As you can tell, you can sort of pick out some of the details from the historic building, but a lot of it has been stripped away. So once they start the renovation of that, it will be exciting to see those details come back. W.T. Grant is another store that a lot of people probably remember. This is on South 3rd Street, and they built this building, and then eventually they moved to another building a little bit south. Grant's opened here in 1932, and they built this store. This is at 17 South 3rd. Today, the Candlewick Commons apartment building is there. In November of 1953, Grant's built a new building and moved just a little bit south, just across the alley from their old building. So these were essentially beside each other. And then, I don't have a picture of it, but the old Grant's, the one that we just looked at, the Klein's store, and in there. So a lot of people have memories of Grant's. There's a sort of a view of it today. And again, I'm just sort of touching on these. I wish that I could go into detail about everything, but we would be here literally all night if we talked about all of the things that I want to talk about. But with that said, send me an email if you'd like to know more information. If you would like me to do a presentation on other specific businesses or types of businesses or whatever, please share your thoughts with me. My contact information, like I said, will be at the end of the presentation. This is a picture of the Roe Emerson Store. This is when it was located on the corner of 3rd and West Main. This is now the present location of Earthworks Recording Studio. And I love this picture, early 20th century. Really looks like it's all kinds of action going on there. Emerson's was located in this building from 1887 until 1928. Now, I'm not sure that they were here the whole time, because I've read some things in the newspaper that led me to believe that they might have been on South Park Place after they left here and then went to their other location just a little bit further south on 3rd Street. But I haven't been able to definitively figure that out yet. But when they vacated this building, it became Woolworths. So Woolworths opened here in 1929, but Woolworths had actually been in Newark before that. So they had been at this building. Here you can see this is a picture from just after a fire that had occurred in this building in 1913. This is actually the building that was located where Grant's built their first building in 17 South 3rd Street. When they tore down this building, then Grant's was able to build their building. However, if you see right here where it says FM Kirby and Company, that was where Woolworths opened, I believe in 1913. And they expanded a few times. They originally were just in a sort of a smaller store, and then they expanded. They tore down a wall so they could expand the building, kept needing more and more room. And then finally, when Emerson vacated in 1928, then they moved to that building. Here's more of a close-up of the Woolworths corner. So they were in those two locations in downtown. And then Woolworths moved to Southgate in 1960. And then I believe they were around until 1993 when they closed. All right, so that is it for my presentation. I would love to answer any questions that anybody has. If you have any, I can stick around for, turn my camera back on too, so you guys can see me again. 7:21 right now, so we had planned on until 7:30. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat box. Thanks so much for your comment, Sharon. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I would be happy to answer any specific questions that you have about businesses, or if you have questions about something that you saw in a photo, anything like that. If you think of something later, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is on the screen. You can email me at corystutes@theworks.org, or you can give me a phone call at my office phone, which is 740-670-8066. Feel free to reach out to me in any of those ways. Someone had asked if I have any history on Jerry's Fabrics. I haven't compiled anything specifically on Jerry's Fabrics other than we did look at some of the buildings that it was in that area. I think it was there until there was a fire in the 90s that finally burned down. There were a couple of fires in the 90s. Research specifically on Jerry's Fabrics other than just what I know about it, but that's definitely something I can look into. Sharon, if you want to send me an email or something so that I have your contact information, I'd be happy to look up stuff for you, or if you have specific questions that you wanted to find out, I can find that out for you too. I do know that it was a really long-term fabric store. In fact, my grandma used to go there. She did not live very close, about an hour away. She would come to Jerry's Fabrics to find specific things that she needed. So it must have been a pretty good one from what I've heard. I did not grow up in Newark, so I don't remember it, but I do know it was on South 3rd Street, and I believe was part of a fire and burnt down. Does anybody else have any other questions? Looks like Claudia, you raised your hand. I'm not sure if you have a question or not. If you do have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box. You should be able to see a spot at the bottom of your screen where you can type a message, and I'd be happy to answer it for you. If you think of something later, feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call. If you don't have any questions, of course, you don't have to feel obligated to stick around either, but I can definitely stay on for a few more minutes if anybody's got questions. What about Reynolds shoes? I don't know if I'm familiar with Reynolds. I know Maybold's shoes and several other shoe stores, but that one I'm not sure. Let me write that down. And if this is something that you think too is a topic that I could keep presenting on, oh, Maybold's, yeah. I think Maybold's was the one that was on South 3rd Street also, across from essentially across from where Jerry's Fabrics would have been, in the building that is just slightly north of the original location of Fleek and Neal. Some of these I just know a little bit about them. This is a great topic too, because some of these places, a lot of people have memories of. So if you have memories of that kind of stuff, share those with me as well. I really appreciate hearing that because it helps me work on my presentations. Let's see, someone says, Mom worked at Jerry's for many years, started on 2nd and then south near O'Coons. Okay. Very interesting, yeah. Yeah, Mabel's north of Kixmix. I think that's the one that has the regular adult door, and then they have a children's door as well, if I'm not mistaken, which the doors are still there. Of course, it's not a shoe store anymore. I think the last thing that was there was maybe a bakery, if that's still there, but the doors are there. So thank you so much, everyone, for your feedback. I really appreciate your kind comments. Please keep an eye out for our future presentations and things that we're doing. We have been trying to do a lot of works at home types of programs. Throughout this past year, we've been doing Zoom presentations, not just history, but also Sidome presentations, which is our planetarium, as well as outreach and programming to schools and families and that kind of thing. So definitely pay attention to our website, pay attention to our Facebook page so that you know what types of things are coming up. We have been scheduling more history at home presentations, so we will have those continuing into 2021. We also still have a lot of our other at home programming as well, including STEM kits that you can purchase, which are sort of a week's worth of STEM activities. And we have been doing free STEM kit giveaways throughout Licking County and some of the surrounding areas. Those will continue through this month. So keep an eye out on those locations as well. We've been doing a lot of things to reach out to the community since a lot of us are continuing to be stuck at home or we're schooling from home, just generally doing things we're not used to doing. So if there's any way that we can support you in any of that kind of stuff, let us know, because we're always looking for ways to give back to our members and our patrons and our community, because your support keeps us going. So we really want to return the favor. So I appreciate all of you who have participated in this. This was a really fun presentation for me to research on. And so if you have any other ideas of things that you want to hear me present on, please let me know. Again, you can send me an email and I would be happy to put those into consideration. And then you never know, you might see a presentation about it. So again, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Oh, someone did ask a question. What about the Sullivan Building restoration? So that's really interesting. It's, I think they had planned a 3-phase restoration process. The first phase was the foundation and everything underneath. So that was completed a few years ago. They completely redid the basement. The basement is actually larger than the building, so it goes out under the sidewalks. And there had been a lot of damage to that from street updates and signs that were actually, they put signs in and they were poking through the ceiling of the basement. So they had to do that. So they got that all squared away a few years ago. And then stage 2 was the outside restoration, which I think is done now. They rebuilt the corner of the building, which had been taken away at some time. They had a lot of terracotta tiles made, which the whole building is covered in terracotta. So they had to have those specially made. There are only, I think, 2 manufacturers in the entire United States who could do it. And so that was a big project. They had the windows redone. The mosaics were all redone. In fact, I actually got to travel to, it was called Conrad Schmidt Studios, and it was just outside of Milwaukee. And I got to travel there and see the windows there while they were being restored. And I got a tour of their stained glass studio, which was really amazing. But the building is looking really incredible. And we're really fortunate that the Licking County Foundation has taken that on, because it's such a community treasure. And I know that they have raised several $1 million to fund this. It's an incredibly expensive thing to restore a building like that. There was a lot of attention to detail. And in fact, Sullivan had a line item in his budget that was just for gold leaf. Because if you've seen the inside of the building, it's really ornately decorated. There's a lot of stenciling, just really, really expensive craftsmanship inside the building. So it's taken a lot of effort for them to do it right. And I think the last phase is the inside. So they're going to do it so that it's historically sympathetic and doesn't just gloss over how the building looks right now. So I think they are going to leave a section of the mosaic unrestored just to show what it looks like. That's at least what I heard. And then it will eventually become a sort of a community information center. The Explore Licking County, which is the Visitors Bureau, is going to move in when it's open. So they'll have their offices there. And then the first floor will be open to the public so that people will be able to come in. So it's really exciting. And if you've been past it lately, it looks absolutely amazing. We're really fortunate to have a building like that in our community. So it's definitely something that needs taken care of. All right, so another question. Nope, same one. All right, well, again, thank you everyone for joining. And this, like I said, was being recorded, so it will be posted on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. If you want to rewatch any parts of it, or if you want to share it with friends or family, please feel free to do so. Again, reach out to me with any questions. In the meantime, I hope everybody stays warm, has wonderful holidays, and I will see you in 2021.